Neither Carlton nor United News and Media could provide a spokesperson for this programme. However, United issued the following statement.
Too much comment has focused on the myth that if United and Carlton merge, the balance of ITV will be upset by a north-south divide. The truth is simpler. What will be created is a virtual duopoly in ITV, two reasonably balanced pillars of power. The competition between us will bring a creative and commercial edge that will be good for viewers and good for the prospects of overseas sales. Far from a cynical attempt to carve up the country, our aspiration is to build a strong British television business capable of investing multi-millions into new production.
With me live in the studio, I have Phil Willis, the Labour MP for Oldham East and Saddleworth and a former television producer. He recently initiated an early-day motion in the House of Commons urging the government to prevent a southern merger in ITV. And in Kent, we have the Labour MP Derek Wyatt, who runs satellite and cable TV channels. Now, Phil Willis, United News and Media, you've heard what they say there. They're saying you're creating a lot of storm over nothing.
Well, they would say that, wouldn't they? This is very important. A southern bloc, and don't forget that the richest franchises in ITV are in the south and southeast, would inevitably take advertising revenues away from the north. And we're talking about Yorkshire and Tyne-Tees as well as Granada. And that would undermine the production base, and that's a real threat in the modern economy. We're not just talking about an exclusive small industry here. The television industry, as we saw on the report, generates thousands and thousands of jobs, and we've got to protect that. We've lost our newspaper industry from Manchester to the south because of technology changes. We can't afford to lose our television industry.
But, I mean, you're saying that Granada would be in this position, but, I mean, if this merger was stopped, surely the next thing that would happen would be that Granada would gobble up first one of the southern giants and then the second one.
Most people in the industry want to see a single ITV in the United Kingdom. They say that that's needed to protect the UK industry from overseas predators, and I agree with that. But the question is, how do you get there? If you get there through two equal-sized companies fairly competing on an east-west basis, then that's fine. But if you move to a north-south, where the south would be dominant, two-thirds of advertising revenue, and they would be able to squeeze those advertising revenues, then that would squeeze the production centres in the north of England, and we'd end up with one powerful centre in London and virtually nothing anywhere else.
Derek Wyatt, what do you say to that?
Well, I've only caught some of that. The technology's not so wonderful after all here. But I think if I've got Phil's analysis right, he's concerned about the production base shifting. But if I've read the reports correctly, Granada will make an offer for either Carlton or United if Stephen Byers allows the merger.
That's right, but I mean, what he's saying is that that if you allow it to go ahead on the present basis, there'd be a huge block of rich advertising available to the merged giants in the south, and Granada would be disadvantaged, the quality of programmes would go down, and therefore our northern production base would be affected.
Well, I'm not so familiar with that argument. I think what concerns me most is that in the last year, AOL has merged with TCI and Disney has started to make huge inroads into the online market. We need one British player, and the faster we can get there, the better. Otherwise, Vodafone will just snap us all up.
Well, the faster we get there, the better. I mean, this seems to be the nub of this argument. Yeah. You think speed actually could be very dangerous.
Derek's right. We need a single ITV for the reasons that he's mentioned. The problem is that these big boys in the south want to be the dominant players. And inevitably, just like in other industries, in chemicals and engineering, if you get one dominant player, the smaller one gets squeezed out. The future of jobs, a future of economic growth in a modern economy is largely based on the digital revolution. And if Manchester and Liverpool and Leeds and Newcastle lose those revenues, then we won't be able to play our part. So I agree with Derek's end objective. My worry is, how do we get there?
Now, isn't there a role for government here, Mr. Wyatt? Rather than allow the sort of market forces to prevail, that Mr. Byers should manage this move to one ITV?
Yes, again, the technologies, I can hear some of this discussion and not all of it, sadly, in Chatham.
I'm sorry about that. Did you hear my question to you?
I think I've got the gist of that. The Broadcast Acts of the end of the 1980s and 1996 were seriously flawed. What we have got, though, is the opportunity through digital to have proper digital regional television. This isn't yet on anyone's marker board, but it's very high on mine. We've got ITV1 and ITV2 on digital. There's no reason why there shouldn't be ITV3, which is a 7 days a week, 24-hour regional network, to which, Granada might be a bidder in the North West. Frankly, almost anyone could be a bidder, because it won't just be broadcast, it'll also be broadband and narrowband.
Now, that's a suggestion that Granada effectively be liberated from its commitment to make regional programmes for the region, and you allow other maybe Granada subsidiary or some other digital company to make Granada Tonight and programmes like that.
Fascinating debates, these. I think we have to have the public service, and I think Derek agrees with this, a public service commitment from ITV, otherwise the BBC would be left on its own. But we've also got to ensure that commercial television, ITV, can exploit these new technologies, because otherwise the Americans and the Europeans will, as Derek says, swallow us up. And my concern is that whilst Soho in London might be benefiting from this new technological revolution, I also want Salford, Oldham, Leeds and Newcastle to benefit, because without that opportunity, in the long run, it won't just be a question of staying still, it will be a question of losing out.
Mr. Wyatt, I mean, I don't know whether you fully appreciate, but we have seen the newspaper industry in the North West decimated, and even Granada, which Phil Willis is making a good case for here today, moved this morning to the south of England as well. We have seen a hemorrhaging of television production, dare I even say, some of the BBC production's gone to London. So there is a great sensitivity here that things are being drawn into the southeast.
Well, I think it's very much in the government's ability to create entertainment hubs right throughout Britain. I mean, that is a public service. I mean, we're creating 1,000 computer centres over the next 3 years. There's no reason why they shouldn't be broadcast creative centres. Just takes a little bit of joined-up writing in government to do this. We have the greatest technology now in the world. We're the leaders. And we can insist in any white paper that production base stays in the region. I mean, that's something that politicians can do.
But if Granada was relieved of its regional programme responsibilities, and that was farmed out to an independent producer and something, the regional programmes wouldn't have the full support of a media giant like Granada, would they? They'd be rather sort of sorry afterthoughts.
No, I don't see, just because there's one ITV company, I don't see that regional television goes as a result of that. As Phil says, that's the public service remit that we must insist on. What I'm saying is that there's huge talent in our communities, north, south, east and west, which just doesn't get played on television anymore.
Mr. Wallace, finally to you, what do you think Mr. Byers is going to do about this, briefly?
If I knew that, I would be in a very privileged position. I hope that he says this merger of the Southern Bloc can't happen. We need to bring ITV together and say, how do we get to a single ITV which preserves the strong regional base? Coronation Street, for example, is a great success. We've got to keep it.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Wyatt, and Mr. Willis, thank you very much.